Welcome to D Squared Stories, an audio fiction podcast bringing you short serialized weekly stories. This week we have a project I'm really excited for. It's called Fun Facts and Psychic Possession Attacks, or FF&PPA for short. It follows Eric James, a character with the powers of mind control, who traipses about a parody version of the Philadelphia area and finds himself in sticky situations that he has to use his intensely finicky powers to get out of. In my mind, it's somewhat like if Death Note were much lower stakes and dumber, and really got into the weeds of its own mechanics more than it already did. If you like this story, it really would mean the most for you to rate the podcast or like it on YouTube if you're listening there. Drop a comment with what you think, and moreover, to share with someone who you think might also enjoy. I love writing and recording these stories, and I'll keep doing it even if no one's listening, but it's always nice to know when someone is. With all that said, without any further ado, let's get started. Chapter 1. I accidentally make enemies all because I wanted a sandwich. It was as boring as a day as any other. I was walking down 15th Street, another day at my job in the books. I worked as an IT professional for a community college. It paid fine, and moreover, I spent most of my days watching video game streamers in my own office, surrounded by way more monitors than I could ever need. I think the guy who had the job before me convinced the school he needed more than they did in terms of technology. I worry he did weird stuff on them, but he had the common sense to wipe whatever he did with them from any of their computers before he left. I went into a convenience store, called Goosemart. Convenience store as a name does not begin to do the store justice, though. Goosemart is the church where I worship. Their hoagies are my holy communion. That must seem pretty meaningless to those not raised Catholic, but trust me, it's actually less helpful to those who were in understanding how good these sandwiches are. Anyways, moving on before I think of anything else that triggers my deep-seated Catholic upbringing. This was not my usual Goosemart. My train station was closed, so I had to walk a bit further to the one a ways down. I had been here before, but not regularly by any means. I include all this arbitrary detail just to stress how truly unlucky I got, being here, today of all days, at this time of all times. I ordered my sandwich at the kiosk and took the slip to the register. A curly-haired woman around my age with the name tag Sasha rung me up. "That'll be $7.49, she said. Damn inflation. These used to be $5. "Thank you. Have a good day," I said, tapping my credit card. "Thank you. You too, darling," Sasha said. I took a quick second glance at her freckled face. Nope. Do not even think about asking for her number. My rational brain fed me that thought before my irrational brain could even register the original request. My dating life was one sad state of affairs after the other, if you were being generous about it. If you were not, it was a series of half conversations started on dating apps that once in a blue moon could lead to a first date, with no interest in follow-up. Because of this, being called darlin' by a cute cashier would probably be the highlight of my week. I walked over to the sandwich counter to wait for my order. I prided myself, if nothing else, that I did not let my lackluster love life make me into one of two things I hated most. One was the kind of puppy-eyed dork who would stammer and shyly try to work up the nerve to ask a cashier doing her job out. That option, while the lesser of two evils, felt demeaning in a way that I did not have words to describe. The second option was to be a bitter, angry man who took on advice from internet dating coaches, or worse, alpha male influencers who treated women like objects. To be clear, I'm not one of those guys who considers myself such a nice guy to women for bashing that kind of stuff. I just genuinely think anyone who falls for that and thinks it works is a total loser. Anyway, enter Ralph Sibley. A bearded man with a backwards cap and sunglasses stormed into the convenience store. My attention was drawn at first because of the way the door violently swung open as he entered. It stayed when Sasha looked panicked as he approached her counter. "Ralph, I told you to leave me alone," she said. "No, babe," he said. "You don't know what's best for you, but we're meant to be together." The resulting stomach ulcer from hearing his desperate pleading words, mangled in a way to try to make himself seem in charge, nearly doubled me over in pain. Sasha groaned. "You don't. You're a maniac, Ralph." My company, being situated in the city, has security training once a year. A big thing we focus on is de-escalation tactics. The idea being, most people can be talked down from doing something insane as long as you talk to them right. Sasha, calling this guy a maniac, clearly never received this training. While I would never blame one person for the actions of another, it seemed like one thing sadly led to another here because Ralph pulled out a handgun and brandished it around the Goosemart. "You're going to come with me right now, Sasha Fine, or these people are going to get it." Screams rang out. I might have been one of them, hard to remember. I do remember Sasha freezing up, and in all my randomly appearing courage, I made a careful approach towards the other side of the counter with my hands raised. I tried my hand at de-escalation. "Hey, Ralph, was it?" I asked nervously. "I'm on your side here, but maybe we can get what you want some other way." My lying must need some serious work because Ralph just glared at me. Despite his sunglasses obscuring my full view of his face, I could tell he was mad I interfered. "Let me make this guy an example," Ralph said. As he did this, I looked around at the faces of others. I brought my hands to my ears. Before making what would have been a very drastic decision, I noticed he was approaching me, not pointing the gun directly at me. I stayed still watching him until he swung back his hand and struck me with its backside. It was a decent hit to my face. I probably could have stayed standing. I flung myself to the ground with the hit as a way of taking myself out of the situation. "Anyone else who wants to get involved won't be so lucky," Ralph warned. I made a point of staggering and collapsing again. Ralph must have felt very strong from this, but in reality, I just needed the moment to get out my phone and lay it flat in front of my face. I heard Ralph move back to threatening Sasha, so masculinely demanding that she be in his life because she needed him. I swear I might choke on the irony in the air. Instead of that, I opened my phone and did a search for Sasha Fine. Her name popped up on social media. I clicked it. GooSmart Wi-Fi in this moment was the true hero of the story because it loaded so quickly. I did a quick glance. All photos of Ralph, if any still existed on her page, did not show up. Ralph continued to argue with Sasha, who was begging him to leave. I clicked a recent photo. A single heart in the comments from Ralph Sibley filled me with ecstatic joy. I tapped it. Immediately I was greeted by a profile of a bearded man, holding, come on, what else would it be? A big fish, while standing on a boat. But this time, he had no shades on. I stuck my thumbs into my ears as I lay on the ground. Fun fact number 1. My name is Eric James, and I have the power to take possession of the body of anyone I choose by sticking my thumbs in my ears, so long as I know what their face looks like and where they currently are. I call this a psychic possession attack. I felt my consciousness transfer into Ralph's body. I was now looking down at a terrified Sasha through dark shades with a gun in my right hand. My fingers felt chunkier than my normal skinny body, and I was painfully aware of my gut pressing up against my belt. The taste of light beer in my mouth gave me an idea of how he might have gotten to this state. Taking full control took a few seconds to get used to every time I did it, but when it was complete, I heard Sasha. "Ralph, please, you're not well. Just get out of here. The cops are definitely on their way," she said. I paused and scratched my head with my free hand. "Damn, what am I doing?" I made Ralph ask. Sasha looked so baffled and possibly the slightest bit relieved. "Ralph, just please leave," she said. "I'll do you one better," I said. "I'll wait here until the cops get here and turn myself in." Sasha looked so confused. I think she was still very tense, and who could blame her for that? She did seem to be in silent acceptance of this. Most people in the store seemed to calm down a bit too. I watched through Ralph's eyes as a lady left from behind the sandwich counter and went over to check on my real body lying on the ground. I panicked a little and pointed Ralph's gun in that direction. "No, no, no," I said. "He's still pissed me off and is going to lay there until I'm gone, doing all that de-escalation bullcrap. What does he think he is, a lawyer?" The lady nervously backed off, and I seemed to successfully deter anyone else from coming near to check on my body, and more importantly, the phone I neglected to lock before possessing Ralph. My grasp on time was shaky, but I was pretty sure I needed to buy a little more time before my phone automatically locked on its own. I doubt anyone would be able to piece together what happened from Ralph's social media being on my phone before I passed out, but I had no reason to make that gamble. Fun fact number 2. My own body, when I'm performing a psychic possession attack, will be completely unconscious until my possession of the target ends. I made everyone completely uncomfortable for 5 additional minutes as we all waited with bated breath for the cops to get there. It was at this point I lowered Ralph's handgun to the ground and slid it across the floor. As expected, 2 men in the store immediately charged at Ralph, trying to tackle him to the ground. I thought this might happen. Right before they got to him, I brought Ralph's hands into his ears and put his thumbs into each of them. Fun fact number 3. A psychic possession attack either ends when I make my target move his thumbs into his ears, or if the body I am possessing loses consciousness at any point during my control. Back in my own body, I felt myself getting helped back to my feet by the woman behind the sandwich station. The cops quickly came through the door and cuffed Ralph, who had already pretty much been entirely detained in the chaos of returning to control of his body while being taken down to the hard GooSmart floor. "What the hell?" he asked. "When did you get here? What just happened to me? Fun fact number 4. The target of a psychic possession attack will remember nothing of what they did while under my control, and the experience of being possessed will feel like a nap, though with none of the restorative feelings that a nap might bring. His babbling seemed like the nonsensical ramblings of a drugged-up robber who the cops were all too used to cuffing and roughing up as they needed here in this fine city. When they eventually take witness statements and hear a summary of events, they might find this sudden change of heart to be odd and his apparent lack of memory confusing. However, they have much better things to do than wonder why an abusive ex-boyfriend might have had a bizarre psychotic episode in the middle of a much larger bizarre psychotic episode. The cops had us hang around for a little, but fortunately for me, felt satisfied with the statements of Sasha and her general manager at the store. I had prepared mentally to say how I tried to talk him down, but when he hit me, I figured the best thing I could do at that point was pretend he had clocked the lights out of me. It was an entirely believable story, but I still rehearsed it internally. Cops scare me a bit. I took my sandwich, a chicken salad hoagie with avocado and hot peppers, if anyone cares to know, and ate it at my train station. I completely missed the train I intended to make because of this fiasco, and now was subjected to waiting a whole hour for the next one. Public transit, gotta love it, but also gotta hate it. Somehow, a thought flashed into my head, and I opened up my phone again. I was still on the page for Ralph Sibley. I took the opportunity to browse his public socials. There were some gym pics, the fish profile picture was somewhat new. There were a lot of Bible verses for someone who had just brought a gun into a convenience store and threatened to use it on everyone. He also seemed to link a lot to this streamer, Wide Colin. The name made me chuckle a little, but something was familiar about it. As if I was suddenly whisked into my own mind palace, I opened a door and info about Wide Colin came pouring into my brain against my will. He was one of those aforementioned alpha male influencers, a semi-popular and successful one. How people prefer one guy telling you to go to the gym and insult women as a pickup line from another in the sea of these miscreants was something I could never understand. I took the train to the end of the city limits where I lived. My apartment was a short walk from the train station, and I hurriedly went up the steps. I entered my shoebox studio and flipped my smart television onto my favorite streaming app. While it loaded, I poured myself a double of a nice bourbon I kept in my cabinet. I sat back down, and to my delight, Wide Colin was currently streaming. He was reacting to some obscure opinion piece on some women's magazine about how men should still pay for dates and treat women equally. "This is the problem with feminism, guys," he said passionately. "It always leads to a state where women are first-class citizens and expect all guys to be emasculated serfs." I personally could not follow the path from one woman who published a piece about wanting to be treated to dinner while simultaneously not becoming an object because of it, was equivalent to a matriarchal feudal state. But the chat seemed on board with it. Meanwhile, I had pulled up my laptop to do some investigating on the guy. Wide Colin lived not that far from me, in the larger city to the north of me, about 3 hours away. He seemed to have been streaming for about 5 years now, and had a sizable audience. "I'm telling you guys, on a date, when you get the bill, ask her if she's going to pay it," he continued. "If she even hesitates, then split it and drop her. If she does with no hesitation, then pay the whole thing and try to get a second date because she's a high-value woman." My stomach ulcer from earlier seemed to flare up again hearing those last 3 words. I found it fascinating how Colin engineered a social interaction for his viewers to follow that almost inevitably would lead them to some sort of dispute. Obviously, no one wants to be stuck with a bill that you could split, but on the off chance that they are willing to pay, now you just seem like a psychotic jerk for trying to impose it on them and then demanding to do it yourself. That was really the least of my concerns, though. I was still researching Colin's whereabouts. I had found that his name was suspected to not even be Colin, but that was not relevant to me. Unlike Light Yagami in his Death Note, I had no need for someone's name to use my power on them. A person's face was in the middle of our Venn diagram. Then on my side, what I needed that he did not was their exact location. I managed to clock a video of Colin's where he did a house tour. I cross-referenced this with what I found to be a public listing for his address, and the street side view seemed to match the video. I watched him go into his house from the outside. I fast-forwarded along until he got to his streaming room. It was upstairs and to the right. Double-checking the street side view, I think I managed to clock the window he would be behind. That should be enough. I plugged my thumbs into my ears and got ready to do my thing. Fun fact number 5. A psychic possession attack will fail if I do not know the correct location of my target, and then simply nothing will happen. The range of how precisely I need to have their location is not entirely clear, but not being able to identify them as in a room or a building that they are in always seems to cause a failure. I frowned. On second thought, This room in the house tour video was not the same color or style as the room he was streaming from on the television right now. The house tour video was 3 years old. I continued scrubbing through it. Based on what I saw, he was most likely now streaming from the room he used as a bedroom or from his basement. The color was the same, and there were no discernible things that I could see on screen to help me make the final determination. Fun fact number 6. A psychic possession attack will fail unless I am certain beyond a reasonable doubt about a person's location. I cannot simply guess their location and take control without having evidence they are there, even if I am guessing the correct location. I watched on for a moment in frustration, carefully studying the room for any hints, but there was nothing to be found. I found myself growing bored. The one-sided conversation Colin was having shifted from bad restaurant etiquette to eating red meat and getting as jacked as possible. And it's like I'm always saying, regular protein powder doesn't cut it, because we weren't meant, as men, to eat whey. We were meant to eat elk and bucks, he said. I watched on as he continued this tirade with the utmost earnestness. He had to just be a grifter, right? I was unable to see how anyone could unironically believe any of this without some sort of profit incentive. Then again, reading the chat, it seemed many people seemed to be unironically following it. So who knows? That's why today's sponsor is so important, he said. Okay, nope, he is a grifter. I watched him look left and look right. Whatever product he was shilling was nowhere in sight. A flash of realization hit him. Be right back, guys. Left it upstairs. My disinterested gaze, which had been shifting to my phone, immediately refocused as he left the screen. The undeniable sounds of his feet clomping up the steps followed. My grin widened into something of a supervillain, noticing a hero's weakness. I waited for him to come back down. Elk powder is the only protein powder made with real elk, and despite what the ongoing litigation might say, it is perfectly safe. I raised my thumbs into my ears and plugged them in and launched my attack. My consciousness blurred, and when it came back, I was staring at a webcam in a janky, messy basement setup. I had elk powder in hand. I must have taken a longer moment than I thought to recover, because when I started reading the chat, they were responding. Bro is zoning out again. Wide, man, you gotta lock in. He is daydreaming about this powder. I shook my head in a show of coming back down from the clouds. Sorry, brothers, I said. There was an awkward moment where my voice, while talking normally, came out as far more high-pitched than Colin's had been. I quickly masked it with a cough, as if I had something in my throat. This low-life loser has done all of his streaming and videos in a low voice, way lower than his normal pitch. How fragile does your masculinity have to be that you deliberately take your voice down an octave from its natural pitch? I found the octave that he used as a disguise and started again. Sorry about that, my fellow alphas, I said. But yeah, this powder has absolutely changed my life. I waited a bit until I saw the responses in chat return to normal. It made me realize that I have parental issues because my mommy didn't love me enough, and my daddy never taught me how to be a real man. I fought back a sinister grin. I wanted nothing about this to be possibly interpreted as sarcastic. I needed to break this man down entirely in the public eye. That's our problem, boys. We don't talk enough about our feelings. Go hug your homies and cry it out. Once you do that, you'll realize how much of a sham this whole alpha male thing is. I'm a loser and a fraud, and I can't keep going on like this. I navigated around to find the button to end the stream and clicked it. I watched as the hive mind of bros in the chat were freaking out. Some of them said this was clearly a joke. Some of them were mad and calling Wide Colin a beta. Others among them were more conspiratorial, saying things that the feminized elite finally got to him. I just chuckled. I went upstairs into his kitchen and opened up his fridge. To my surprise, there was very little beer, but a ton of spiked seltzers with fruity flavors. I swear, the guys who try so desperately hard to be so manly almost always end up having the exact tastes they would bash in another man. It speaks to a kind of self-hatred that even I could not imagine. Unsatisfied with that, I decided to check the freezer. Presto! A big bottle of vodka stashed in the freezer. I poured myself a pint glass of the stuff and sat on the couch. I flipped on the television to basketball. Ugh. To my total lack of surprise, my team was losing. I started trying to work my way through the vodka at a decent pace. I made this easy by making a drinking game. Drink each time the other team scores. I was about fully done when I started to feel it hitting and decided that was probably good enough. I laid back down on the couch and brought Colin's thumbs back into his ears. Fun fact number 7. In someone else's body, I experience everything physically as it is happening to them, as if it was happening to me. However, as soon as my mind returns to my body, I no longer experience any of it. In other words, I just got Colin drunk off his ass, so there was no way he would have the capability to get back on stream and take back any of what he said in a timely manner. That, and I was also a little out for revenge on account of him being indirectly responsible for me getting decked in the face, so I was hopeful he might puke or get a hangover or something like that. I learned all of these fun facts in a trial and error manner, mostly by messing around with online streamers and influencers who annoyed me. It was something of a hobby, mostly harmless. I had good reasons for using my powers exclusively this way. I had a series of rules that I followed. These were mostly to make sure that I could never somehow be caught, and some to just keep myself bound by a consistent moral code. My first rule was to only use my powers on people who deserved to be publicly humiliated, and to only use my powers for said public humiliation and some minor inconveniencing of their lives. I never took control of anyone who was not actively antagonizing people. Additionally, even though some people arguably deserved worse, I would never seriously cause any lasting physical ailment to anyone as a result of my psychic possession attacks. My second rule was to only use my powers on people who I did not know personally and who had a public presence. My attacks were virtually traceless, but there are some signs. If everyone I knew suddenly started waking up with thumbs in their ears and no memory of what had happened before, that would be a problem. However, if any of these streamers ever formed a support group and shared their common threads and managed to figure out that they got possessed and how I possessed them, it would be no use. How would they ever find me, the needle, in the haystack of their tens of thousands of other viewers? My third rule was to never do anything to benefit myself or anyone I know with this power. I had formulated ways that I could discreetly have some streamers put their money in the blockchain and through a series of untraceable transactions, lose sight of where it went. Minimal amounts at a time, too, that would not warrant investigation by authorities. It just felt too slippery of a slope, though. Eventually, I would make some kind of error that would result in my exposure. My fourth and final rule, the most important rule, do not let my power be discovered. I would be permitted to break any previous rule for the purposes of following this one. Oh, wait a minute. No, there's another rule I forgot. My fifth and final rule, the super most important rule. Don't die. That one I can also break any of the other four to keep true. That's why I was able to take control of Ralph at GooseSmart. Dying would be bad, because it would mean I could no longer live, and that seemed somewhat scary. With the reflection of those rules in mind, I switched the television to finish watching my team lose. I finished up my bourbon, I prepped my lunch for the next day, I put all of my dishes in the dishwasher and ran it and then went to bed. My next day came and went without much interest. The next week came and went without much excitement also. I never had a reason to go back to the GooseSmart where I met Ralph. In keeping with Rule 4, I made it a practice not to use my powers in such a dramatic fashion as I did, more than occasionally. One streamer having what appears to be a manic episode and humiliating themselves is just par for the online ecosystem. Multiple streamers in the same week having episodes in a similar fashion, that would draw people's attention. I did, however, greatly relish reading the aftermath of my possession of Colin. He apparently learned of what happened later in the night and got on stream around midnight, desperately trying to take it back. He claimed that it was not him and that he had been taken over by an evil spirit or was the victim of a government mind control program. Colin was different than most people who I had possessed. The winning play that he did not know was to come back and say it was all a joke. In our irony-poisoned, nothing-is-serious age, the best strategy against taking accountability for anything that you've ever said or done is to say it was a prank or a joke. Streamers who I made besmirch their own names and directly insult their fans came back the next day with a condescending sense of superiority towards anyone who thought they were serious. As sad as it is, it works fairly well. Everyone wants to be in on the joke. No one wants to be the butt of it, even if the joke is not real. Much better than Colin, who was only drawing more and more negative attention to himself with his schizophrenic-sounding ramblings. He may have retained the majority of his loyal fans as a result of this. Again, he had long cultivated a culture of believing it was them, the lonely outcast alpha males, against the world. The world just happened to have some unbelievable tricks up its sleeve against them. However, the surrounding internet was more likely to make fun of him rather than if he had just never addressed it at all. I read headline after headline about it, from news sources that normally have better things to do than cover internet streamers. Manosphere streamer Wide Colin goes on delusional rant about government mind control after apparent mental breakdown. Men and mental health issues, how the Wide Colin incident exposes the frightening state of mind of alpha male influencers and their fans. Fact check. No, there is no government program capable of taking over people's minds. I was curious how in-depth the reporting for that last one was. It was something I pondered somewhat frequently. Was I just a freak, Someone uniquely skilled with a very particular ability and particular setup? Or was this possible for everyone to do? But I was the only person who stumbled upon how to do it. My theory was the former. Surely someone who I had taken control of woke up with their thumbs in their ears and no memory of what they had just done. Someone must have noticed that coincidence and put 1 and 2 together and tried to do it to someone else. I notoriously took on idiots and self-aggrandizing people with my psychic possession attacks, so if any of them noticed how it was done and how to do it themselves, they almost certainly would not be as subtle as I was. They would have handicapped or humiliated their critics and opponents or done something outlandish to benefit themselves. No, it was more likely that, for some reason, this power was exclusive to me. I had almost considered adding that as a fun fact to the list, but I could never fully confirm it. Nonetheless, in reading the headlines of the event at the end of the week, I did notice one that stood out to me. It was from a chronically online, right-wing internet page. Wide Colin announces stream to expose the person who mind-controlled him. I clicked it in a hurry. It appeared that this weekend, around noon, Colin had revealed to sources close to him that he was going to expose the person who took control of him. The article adds that when asked if he was going to expose the agency, he responded clarifying it was a single person he was going to expose. I felt myself sweat a little. There was no way. I racked my brain thinking about this. Did I make a mistake? Was there some loose thread that I failed to consider? I Googled Ralph Sibley. He was still being held on bail. There should have been no way he could have communicated with Colin. I read the press statement regarding him, though. He was representing himself and claiming that he had been mind-controlled. Of course, no lawyer was going to take up that case. Had someone visited him, though? This was bad. I weighed my options. There were less than 24 hours before his live stream where he would allegedly expose me. Should I try to determine his location, possess him, and kill him? Should I visit the jail and take control of a guard and get Ralph out of the picture? I never even considered using my powers for such violent purposes before. But Rule 4, and potentially 5, were on the line here. Calm down. Even if Colin knew everything down to exactly who I was and where I lived, it was meaningless. He could not prove in a court of law that I had done anything to him. When I did my experiments, I used a burner account and VPN. He would not be able to prove I even watched the stream where he was possessed. As for his cronies, maybe I would need to move, take some time off from work, but I always had the upper hand. If I could see their face, they could do nothing to me. I would watch the stream, I would see what he revealed, I would act accordingly in a way that would keep me from getting caught. I slept terribly the night before Colin's noon stream. I got up bright and early, made myself a coffee, and sat in front of my computer. I pulled up the stream whole minutes before he was meant to go live. When he finally did, I chuckled. The background looked the same, but it was noticeably different. He was streaming from his bedroom. I could tell. This was perfect. He had suspected I needed to know where he was to possess him, and I could deceive him by taking control of him if needed, giving him one less piece of information. "All right, gents, no time like the present to get into this," he said. "As you know, today I'm going to expose the person who took control of my mind last week." His chat was abuzz, people cheering him for his bravery, people telling him to be careful, a good number of people clearly just here to make fun of him. "No need to worry about me, gang," he said. "I've loaded my hat with tinfoil, a primary defense against mind control tactics. This coward won't get to me today." He gestured to his backwards baseball cap. On close examination, I could tell there was some foil sticking out of it. I went into a full manic fit of laughter. I nearly fell out of my chair, I was laughing so hard. Fun fact number 8. Tinfoil hats do not protect you against my psychic possession attacks. They just make you look like a crazy person. On a whim, I had tested that in the past. This was great. I probably had no reason to take control of him today. He was just going to make himself look like a complete idiot. I watched as he pulled a sheet of paper before him. "Now that I'm fully protected, allow me to read off the name of the guy who took control of me." A jolt coursed through me. I had to know what he had on that paper. I immediately plugged my thumbs into my ears and took control of his body. The haze took a while to clear like it always did, but I saw myself in front of a streaming setup, in his bedroom as I had predicted. I looked down at the sheet of paper. It was blank. What the hell? I looked at the chat to see how people were responding. For some reason, a bunch of people were spamming the word maestro in all capital letters. "Anyway, sorry, my fellow alphas," I said, deepening my voice. "I feel like I didn't give the build-up to that justice. Let me try again." I thought for a moment about what I was going to say. Then I noticed the chat was turned into a mode where only moderators could message. All of the moderators were spamming the word maestro. No, this couldn't be. I stammered and panicked for a moment. Then I saw a message from a moderator named Tango Foxtrot. "Greetings, Mind Controller," it said. I froze up. "Hey, mods, what are you doing?" I asked. "Turn the chat back on for the big reveal." I waited for a moment. Tango Foxtrot responded. "That wasn't the code word we coordinated with Colin, Mind Controller." I felt myself start to sweat. This was a lot easier than I thought. You really thought we had your info on that blank sheet of paper, and you couldn't help yourself but check. No, we don't know who you are, yet. However, you've given us some key pieces of information, and helped confirm some others we had suspected. "Guys, turn on the chat. You're being really ridiculous," I said angrily as I struggled to keep up Colin's fake voice. You control people by inserting your thumbs into your ears. You need to know their location. You need to know what their face looks like. You revert back to your own body by inserting their thumb into their ears. I felt myself clench Colin's fist. How was this happening? You must feel really special when you use this power, but you shouldn't. The reason I say that, and the reason I know all of this, is because I can do it too. This stream was a test to catch you in the act, confirm that you are like me. The fact that you knew the stream was coming, but could not take control of Colin at any point prior to it, proves that your abilities are bound by the same limits mine are. Thank you for confirming. I look forward to meeting you soon. I felt myself stare at the chat message, in the body of my target, feeling trapped in it. Fun fact number 9. I am the only person in the world with the power of psychic possession. That I know of. Thank you for listening to this chapter of Fun Facts and Psychic Possession Attacks. If you enjoyed, please rate the podcast, give it a like on YouTube, or share with someone else who you think might also enjoy. If you prefer reading stories to listening to them, the written versions of each story is uploaded to the D Squared Stories Substack after the finale of the audio version comes out. That means that stories such as Latocracy, Amaretta, and Wonderful Baking Lodge are all fully uploaded there. You can stay up to date with FF&PPA by following us on social media. That will be D Squared Stories on just about any of the major platforms. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to have you listen again next week.